I lost everything before Christmas, but God sent a stranger who changed my life forever. Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of Times Square in December, lights flashing so brightly they could blind you, music blasting from every corner, people laughing like life handed them bonuses wrapped in gold foil, and all you feel is emptiness. That was me. Before I tell you my name, before I tell you my testimony, I want you to step into my shoes for a moment. Think about the coldest night of your life, not the kind that comes from winter, but the kind that comes from life itself. The kind of cold that sinks into your bones because everything you counted on slips right through your fingers. I remember the moment it hit me. I stood there, right near 47th Street, with yellow cabs rushing past and tourists taking pictures beside me, and I felt like a ghost drifting through a city that didn't even notice it had run me over. My hands were tucked into my jacket pockets, but the cold still found its way in. My phone had just buzzed with the final message that sealed everything. "We have to let you go. We wish you the best." That was the email that ended my job. As if that wasn't enough, 3 hours earlier my landlord had placed my boxes outside my apartment door. Not because he was heartless, he was tired of my promises. And honestly, I couldn't blame him. And now here I was in the city of dreams, with nothing but a backpack that felt heavier with every step I took. I hadn't even introduced myself yet. My name felt too heavy to say aloud. But since you're walking with me now, I'll share it. I'm Arielle. A girl who came to New York chasing big visions and bold dreams. But on this night, I could barely chase the warmth of my own breath. I watched a massive Christmas billboard flash overhead, a smiling family in matching sweaters, gathered around a tree, looking like joy was their birthright. And the thought punched me right in the chest. Why does everyone else get their miracle before Christmas but me? For a moment, I wished the lights would dim just long enough for me to hide my shame. But New York doesn't know how to dim. It shines even when your life is falling apart. The noise, the lights, the crowd, all of it pushed against the silence inside me. My chest felt tight, my throat felt dry, and I swallowed the painful truth. I had lost everything. 3 days before Christmas, people rushed past me carrying bags from Macy's and gift boxes tied with ribbons, and I wondered how many of them were fighting silent battles too. Or was it just me? A cold gust swept through, and I wrapped my arms around myself, not because it helped, but because it felt like the only thing I could hold on to. That was the moment I whispered under my breath, "God, where are you in all this?" It wasn't a dramatic prayer. It wasn't a holy one. It was the kind of question that escapes when your heart is bruised and you're tired of pretending. I didn't know it then, but that tiny whisper spoken in the middle of a city that didn't know my name was the beginning of something I couldn't see yet. A turning point wrapped in darkness. But for now, all I knew was this. I was alone. I was broken, and New York didn't care. But God did. I just hadn't seen how yet. I wandered until my legs felt numb. New York has a way of swallowing your footsteps, no matter how slow they are. By the time I reached Bryant Park, the crowd had thinned, the air had sharpened, and the Christmas tree stood tall like a glowing reminder that life was still moving, just not for me. I sank onto a cold metal bench, dropping my backpack beside me. For the first time all day, I let myself breathe. People skated on the ice with carefree laughter. Vendors sold hot chocolate and roasted chestnuts. A street singer belted out "Oh Holy Night," and somehow that song felt like both a comfort and a wound. The words, "a thrill of hope," hit differently when hope felt like a luxury. My phone battery died in my hand, just like everything else. A little boy ran past chasing a balloon, his mother calling after him with a smile. The kind of smile that reminded me of who I used to be, the warmth I used to have, the faith I used to carry like armor. Now all I carried was a backpack and the ache of a life that didn't go according to plan. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Tears welled up before I could stop them. I tried to blink them away, but they pushed through. And I let them. For the first time in months, I didn't fight the pain, I let it pour. I cried quietly, the kind of cry you hide behind a scarf because you're too embarrassed to let the world see you falling apart. That cold metal bench held the weight of my exhaustion, my guilt, my questions. It held me like God was holding me through something I couldn't yet understand. and somewhere between my sniffles and shivers, I whispered again, God, if you're still with me, please give me a sign. I didn't expect anything, but heaven was already moving. Before everything went wrong, I had plans, real plans. I moved to New York 2 years ago with a photography portfolio and a heart full of stubborn hope. I told myself I'd succeed even if I had to crawl. And at first, I did. Small gigs, birthday shoots, corporate events. People started knowing my name. Bookings came in. My vision felt alive. Then the year turned messy in ways I never saw coming. One rainy afternoon in October, my camera bag was stolen during a shoot in Brooklyn. My fault, I placed it down for 1 minute to adjust lighting. That 1 minute cost me thousands of dollars in equipment. I tried to push through it, borrowing gear, working extra hours at my part-time job, but the pressure kept piling. Then November came and the relationship I poured myself into shattered like glass hitting concrete. No warning, no explanation, just distance where there used to be warmth. December arrived like a thief. Late rent, no clients, overdue bills. A boss who said the company was downsizing. My final check barely covered transportation. One collapse after the other until I found myself on that bench, wondering where the strong version of me went. I didn't tell people what I was going through. I smiled on social media. I posted quotes about resilience. But at night, my heart felt like it was carrying bricks. And that's how I ended up in Bryant Park, a woman whose dreams once burned bright, reduced to a cold whisper of, "What went wrong, God?" The temperature dropped. The park lights dimmed slightly. Skaters began drifting off the ice, but I remained on the bench like it was the only place holding me together. My tears had dried, but my spirit hadn't. The loneliness hit harder than the cold. I reached for my phone, forgetting it had died, and caught my reflection in the black screen. My eyes looked tired, older somehow, like disappointment had carved lines only I could see. For a moment, fear gripped me. I didn't know where I would sleep. I didn't know what tomorrow held. I didn't know if things could get any worse. That thought alone pushed me to the edge. My chest tightened. Not pain, just pressure, the invisible weight of hopelessness. I wrapped my arms around myself and leaned forward, whispering through clenched teeth, "Lord, I can't do this anymore. I don't know how." The wind answered before God did, cold, sharp, merciless. A chocolate cup suddenly spilled near my boots. Hot liquid splashed, making me jump. A small girl looked up at me with wide, apologetic eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Her mother called her gently and they walked away. But those soft, sorry words, they pierced something in me. It was strange how a child's voice could be the final trigger for a collapse. But it wasn't a collapse of despair. It was the collapse of pretending. I covered my face with my hands and cried again. Not quietly this time, deeply. New York didn't pause for me, but heaven heard me. I didn't know the miracle was only minutes away. I felt someone approach before I saw them. Footsteps slowed near my bench, hesitated, then stopped. I wiped my face quickly, embarrassed. A man's voice, soft but steady, broke through the cold air. "Are you all right?" I didn't look up immediately. I wasn't sure I trusted my voice, so I shook my head instead. He sat down on the opposite end of the bench, giving me space. Not too close, not too far, just enough to feel human presence without pressure. "You don't have to tell me what's wrong," he said gently, "but you look like you've been carrying too much alone." I swallowed hard. I didn't plan to say anything, but loneliness makes the truth spill. I lost everything," I whispered. "My job, my place, my equipment, everything." He nodded slowly, not with pity but understanding. People passed by us, their scarves blowing in the wind, but this man stayed still, listening as if my voice mattered in a world that had ignored me. After a quiet moment, he stood. I expected him to walk away, but instead he said, "There's a coffee shop around the corner. Let me buy you something warm." I hesitated. He sensed it and added softly, "Just a meal, no pressure." For reasons I couldn't explain, I trusted him, maybe because he didn't force anything, maybe because his eyes looked honest, maybe because God had finally sent someone. I stood up, my legs trembling, and followed him. And that walk was the first step toward a miracle I didn't see coming. The warmth of the coffee shop hit me like a hug. Cinnamon, fresh pastries, steam rising from cups. It felt like stepping inside hope. He bought me soup and a sandwich, then sat quietly while I ate, as if he knew my body needed the food as much as my heart needed the silence. After a while, he asked my name. "Arielle," I said softly. He smiled. "I'm Daniel." Something about the name felt intentional. I told him bits and pieces, not everything, just enough for him to understand the storm I was in. He listened without interrupting, without judgment, without the usual "why didn't you do this" type lectures. When I finished, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. He pushed it toward me. "I need you to take this," he said. I shook my head. "I can't. It's not charity," he said firmly but kindly. "It's obedience." My breath caught. I didn't understand, but something inside me knew this moment wasn't ordinary. He stood up, placed the envelope in my hands, and said, "God sees you. Don't stop believing in what he put inside you." Before I could say anything, he walked away. Not rushed, not dramatic, just a simple exit like he had done exactly what he came to do. My fingers trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was money, enough for food, enough for shelter, enough to breathe again. But the note inside, "Love came down for you." My heart broke open, not in pain, but in awe. This wasn't a coincidence. This was God. On a cold New York night, through a stranger named Daniel, the miracle had begun. I sat alone in the small hostel that night, the envelope still clutched in my hands. The room was tiny, with a thin mattress and a heater that rattled, but it felt like a palace compared to the streets. I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Yet I couldn't bring myself to touch the soup in the corner of the fridge. I just stared at the note. "Love came down for you." Over and over, I whispered those words. Slowly, their weight began to sink in. Not the money, not the temporary shelter, but the reminder that God hadn't forgotten me, that even when I felt invisible, he had seen my pain. It was the first night I prayed in weeks, a real prayer from the depths of a heart that had almost given up. I didn't ask for wealth. I didn't beg for instant fixes. I just whispered, "God, I'm listening. Show me the next step." And for the first time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months: hope. The next morning, I walked to Rockefeller Center, wrapped tightly in my coat, the crisp air biting my cheeks. I wasn't sure what I would do. My camera bag was gone. My phone had barely any contacts, and yet that note in my pocket felt like a compass. I passed a small seasonal photo booth hearing sign and decided on impulse to go inside. "Looking for a part-time photographer?" I asked nervously. The manager, a woman with a warm smile and twinkling eyes, sized me up but didn't dismiss me. "Sure, can you start today?" I nodded before fear could catch me. By the end of the day, I realized something important. God sometimes works through ordinary doors, doors you wouldn't even notice if you weren't desperate enough to try. This was the first crack in my dark world, a small opportunity, but a start. That first photo booth gig led to another, then another. One client referred me to a small boutique needing photography for their holiday marketing. Then a family hired me for a Christmas portrait session. Each day, I felt more alive. Each small payment reminded me that I wasn't helpless, that my dreams hadn't died, they had only been delayed. But the real miracle wasn't the money. It was how God began restoring my faith in people and myself. I started smiling at strangers again. I began noticing the little joys, the smell of fresh coffee, the sound of carolers, the warmth of a hot shower. The world was still broken, yes, but my heart was no longer frozen. One evening, a week before Christmas, I returned to Bryant Park, the same bench where I had cried. The Christmas tree glowed brighter than I remembered. Children laughed on the ice. Couples strolled by hand in hand. I held a small wooden figurine of a manger I had bought with the first paycheck from my new job. I didn't need grand gestures. I didn't need expensive gifts. I just needed a reminder that love comes down, sometimes in envelopes, sometimes in strangers, and sometimes in the smallest faith in yourself. I whispered a prayer of gratitude. "Thank you, Lord, for being with me even when I couldn't see you." Tears ran down my cheeks again, but this time they were different. They were tears of healing, of restoration, of a heart learning to trust again. By Christmas Eve, my life wasn't perfect. I still didn't have a full studio. I still worried about paying bills, but I had hope. I had faith. I had God. I walked through the glowing streets, past vendors and lights, and realized something incredible. I wasn't the same Arielle who had cried on that bench. I was stronger, wiser. And most importantly, I had learned to see God's hand in ordinary people, ordinary moments, and ordinary opportunities. I sat on the steps near the tree, closed my eyes, and whispered, "Lord, thank you for never forgetting me. Thank you for reminding me that even in the darkest moments, love comes down." And in that moment, I felt a peace that no city noise could drown out. I knew now that my story wasn't just about loss. It was about redemption, about God sending his angels, sometimes in human form, to guide us back to light. Christmas, I realized, wasn't about gifts or grandeur. It was about remembering that Jesus still works wonders today, even in the smallest acts, even when we feel forgotten. With my first few clients, I began noticing something amazing. Every smile I captured seemed to lift me as much as them. Christmas portraits, corporate events, even candid street shots, they weren't just jobs. They were reminders that life could be joyful again. People began trusting me, and with each project, I regained confidence. The fear that had haunted me for months slowly faded. I realized God had not only restored my opportunities, but also my sense of purpose. One morning, I received a call from a family who had seen my photos at Rockefeller Center. They asked if I could take holiday pictures for their children. As I worked, I laughed with them, shared stories, and felt a warmth I hadn't felt in months. It dawned on me. God doesn't just repair what's broken. He connects us with people who remind us we're alive, loved, and capable of joy again. Walking through the streets one evening, snow beginning to fall, I passed Bryant Park again. The lights reflected off the ice, the music played softly, and I felt a simple, overwhelming gratitude. God had shown up quietly in ordinary moments. The stranger with the envelope, the coffee shop, the small jobs that turned into opportunities. And I realized miracles don't always shout. Sometimes they whisper through ordinary acts. On Christmas Eve, I returned to Rockefeller Center to take photos for another family. I watched their children unwrap gifts, their parents' faces glowing with love. As I packed up my camera that night, I felt the presence of something bigger than the city lights, bigger than the crowds. It wasn't just happiness I was seeing. It was God reminding me that love always finds its way, even in the darkest seasons. By the new year, I had booked enough clients to rent a small studio in Brooklyn. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every morning, I walked past the streets that had once swallowed me whole, and I smiled. I understood something crucial. God's timing is never late, and his love never fails. Even when everything seems lost, he is quietly working behind the scenes. The old Arielle, the one who doubted, feared, and hid in shadows, was gone. I laughed more freely, trusted more fully, and saw God's fingerprints everywhere. The stranger who gave me hope had been God's messenger, but I realized he had also been teaching me to become a messenger myself, to notice, to love, and to act when others are hurting. Inspired by my journey, I started volunteering at a local shelter for women in need. I shared my story, helped others find temporary jobs, and offered encouragement. It was incredible how sharing my brokenness became a way to heal not just myself, but others. The love that had come down for me now had a ripple effect, touching lives I couldn't have imagined. One snowy night, I returned to Bryant Park once more. The tree glowed, the ice rink buzzed with laughter, and I held a small manger figurine in my hands. I finally understood what Christmas had been trying to teach me all along. It's not about perfect gifts, extravagant celebrations, or even family pictures. It's about love arriving where it's needed most. Jesus hadn't just visited Bethlehem centuries ago. He visits hearts, cities, and lives today. He hadn't forgotten me, and he hadn't forgotten anyone watching this story unfold. Looking back, I see the journey clearly. I lost everything: my job, my home, my relationship, but I gained something far greater: hope, faith, and the knowledge that God's love is active and personal. I am Arielle Thompson, and I stand today as living proof that no season is too dark for God to show up.